Beyond Reason Radio.
You know, I never thought that I would be cheering for Tom Brady and Gronkowski
in Florida
on
together.
The team.
Yeah.
But because it's a quandary, Tom Benson. It really is. I've been joking in the morning show how I love Tom Brady. I've never not liked Tom Brady, but it really is a quandary because I never wanted to cheer for them before, and now I'm going to have to cheer for both of them.
Yeah, because
they're going to the Tampa Bay Bucks and they're my team. I have to, right? I have to cheer for my team, right?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't want to be a bandwagon guy and just go to another team or
They've
something.
always been your team through thick and thin, huh?
Exactly. Which there's been a lot of thick lately for the Tampa Bay Bucks, and now that they have these two players, there's a chance we're going to go to the Super Bowl. If we even have a Super Bowl.
Or if we even have a game, period. Regular games.
I mean, I know this is not a sports talk show, but it's pretty beyond reason. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason, the voice of truth in a world that is beyond reason. We're on until 8 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio WFLA Orlando. And, of course, we're on Facebook Live as well. You can catch just like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. You can also catch the show later on the podcast, anywhere podcasts are available. One thing, a couple of big topics tonight I'm going to get to. One, I'm tired of how the debate over the virus is being framed, really by people on both sides, because there is a middle ground. And the middle ground is what we have to do, basically. And I'm not always the middle ground guy. There are some times where I really stand on one side. But I think in this case, there is a middle ground. And I'll talk about that. The other thing I want to talk about later on is why did this get political? And not just political. Why did this issue become a partisan issue? And I think I have an answer for that, but we'll discuss it later on in the show. And we also have some breaking news as well. But first, Mr. Tom Benson is here. And how are you, Tom?
I'm fine. I beat out the breaking news, huh? Wow.
Yeah, of course. I know where my bread is buttered.
Okay.
I know who pushes the buttons. I know who I have to take care of.
The amazing thing about this is it's like we're watching a parade. And as the parade goes on, the characters are getting stranger and stranger in this whole thing.
That's very true. The balloons are getting weirder.
Which makes it entertaining, but still frustrating as heck.
Yeah, I totally understand. And, we are going to talk about the effect on the economy once again. And our breaking news has to do with that. But I thought it was interesting because you said you went to Olive Garden yesterday for takeout.
Correct.
And I thought
Sunday. This is Sunday.
Sunday.
Yeah. 12:30. Mm-hmm. We placed an order about noon. They said be there at 12:30 to pick it up. We picked it up at the Olive Garden.
Right.
Not a single person in the parking lot. Right across the street was a Red Lobster. No one there. Across the other way was a Lone Star Steak Center place. No one there. I don't know how these restaurants are going to make it. They got to get back into operation soon. And I think you're right. There is a middle ground to take. We have to stick a toe in the water and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. And some governors are wanting to do that already, and they're being blasted for it, which I don't really understand. But that's not the only story I've heard recently of restaurants really struggling. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine went to Habaneros, mm-hmm. which is a Mexican restaurant, and they said their revenue was down.
I bet.
Some crazy amount. I forget what it was. And then we found out, it was just a couple weeks ago that Darden, they said Olive Garden, speaking of Olive Garden, the revenue's down like 70%.
And their headquarters staff was, put on furlough.
Yeah. So there has to be a middle ground. We'll get to that in a moment. The breaking news is the fact that it looks like Congress has come to a deal on the PPP is what they're calling it, the Paycheck Protection Program, because It dried up last week. You know, it was like $350 billion, and they ran out of money. And small businesses still need help. A lot of them need help because they have no other way to pay their employees right now. They're not getting any income. Well, according to Axios, another $484 billion is coming for hospitals, expanded testing, and replenish the coronavirus stimulus bill's energy loan program for small businesses. With the possibility of a bill reaching President Trump's desk before the weekend, Senate Republicans tried to add $250 billion to the loan program earlier this month, but they were blocked by Democrats who demanded more funding for hospitals and testing. Says here $322 billion of the agreement is to replenish the Paycheck Protection Program. $60 billion is allocated to small lenders and community banks. $60 billion is for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. $75 billion for hospitals and $25 billion for testing. So that's at least some good news for some small businesses out there.
And a lot of people have still not gotten their checks from the government. And I understand that a lot of them are, especially the people on Social Security, may be going out later this week or next week.
Yeah, I heard from Steve Mnuchin that one of the reasons people didn't get the actual written checks yet is they wanted to make sure people knew how, if they didn't get it the other way, how to register on IRS.gov. So they wanted to give people more time to register. But, I mean, every day matters in this case. But what really frustrates me about all of this is I'm watching the Sunday shows. I'm watching some of the news reports over the weekend. And I notice that everything seems to be framed as shutdowns versus no shutdowns. So when you hear the Sunday shows, they would report on the protests going on around the country. And they would say these protesters are out there complaining and protesting against the shutdown. They would kind of put all the protesters in this one box, that they're all just against these shutdowns and they just want to open up the economy. And I think that's not fair, because there are a lot of protesters out there. I'm sure most of them are not saying we should just open up everything tomorrow. Now, some of them are saying that, of course. You're going to have a diverse group in any kind of protest like that. But most protesters probably are saying, yes, some of the shutdowns were necessary, but what happened are these governors went too far. The governor of Michigan, for instance, went too far by banning people from even visiting their family members in another house or something, or banning what they called non-essential items out of stores. That was really what changed things and caused people to protest. They were willing to make some sacrifices, but what happened is that some of these governors went way beyond and just shut down everything. And people are like, okay, this is not right. You're killing us economically. Now, the other problem I have is, well, another example you had given me before the show. Apparently, there were drones, police drones in New Jersey that were monitoring people in their yards.
In their backyards, in their own houses, yeah.
See, stuff like that. Of course people are going to protest that. That's completely unnecessary.
I saw a cartoon over the weekend where it said, "The people protesting tyrannical government." Wow, what a concept.
Well, and when Trump supported the protesters, there were governors out there who said, oh, Trump is supporting law breaking. Look at him being subversive to the government and supporting law breaking. They shouldn't be protesting. It's non-essential activity protesting. They're breaking the law. And I'm thinking, okay, this is not right. They're framing these protesters, all of them in this one group, that they're all just nut jobs who are political and just want to reopen the country because they're selfish and don't care about lives. A good example of this would be Don Lemon on CNN, of course. He went on this rant recently against what he perceived the protesters were all about across the country. And I guess it shouldn't be surprising, but here's what he said.
You're slapping the faces of the people who are the healthcare workers who put their lives on the line every day because you want a haircut, you want to go play golf. You're concerned about, of course, you're concerned about your business. Tell the president that. And you're out there with guns, with weapons strapped to your chest, saying, "Oh, you want to get you're fighting against the people who are telling you to stay at home, trying to save your lives. You're upset with those people. In the meantime, there are people who are keeping your cities going, keeping your loved ones alive, and you want to get a haircut? Who the hell do you think you are?"
So notice what he did there. He framed all these protesters as people that they just care about getting a haircut. They're just selfish. They just want to get out and have fun.
And they want to carry their guns around.
Which there might be some of them like that.
Sure.
There's going to be like that in any group. But a lot of these protests I saw were people that are saying, I want to be able to reopen my business. I want to be able to go back to work so I can pay my bills. And they're being trashed by Don Lemon. And he kind of puts on a side note, well, if you're upset about your business, complain to President Trump. Like how? That is such shallow thinking. It's such shallow thinking that we should all stay home and to get our bills paid, we should complain to the government to pay it for us. That's not how an economy works. We all know that this is not how an economy works. Now, he's not affected by this. He still gets to work. He's still getting his paycheck. He can still get the DoorDash food delivery if he wants to and has no problem. But other people out there are losing everything, and the government is not going to be able to bail them all out. So to say, well, yeah, of course you're caring about your business, but don't you care about lives? They care about their lives and their families' lives. But it's being framed as they're just crazy people who just want people to die and to open everything back up. Another thing I saw over the weekend was they want the right to get the virus or something. That's not what this is about. And they know it. But there is another side to this. There are some extremes on the other side that really believe that we should just open up everything now, that we should never have done any of these measures, that we should just open up the entire economy and get back to work, and this whole virus is being overblown. And it's not any worse than the flu. Now, it's hard for me to understand how you could believe it's not any worse than the flu when we've had 40,000 deaths in the United States in just the last couple of months.
I have a friend on Facebook who wrote on Sunday he knew 4 people personally who have lost their lives.
Really?
The Boston Globe on Sunday ran 16 pages of obits.
Yeah. I mean, just look at New York City. In 1 month, they had 5,000 more total deaths, not just deaths from coronavirus, total deaths than usual.
Mm-hmm.
So people are complaining that they're probably miscounting the coronavirus deaths. But those 5,000 extra people had to die of something. So if they're not dying of coronavirus, what are they dying of? It's pretty obvious that most of them are dying because of this disease. So this is a very serious thing. But to act like, okay, it's all or nothing, it's foolish. There is a middle ground here. There are things that we can do to start opening up the economy and preventing economic collapse. Because no matter what Don Lemon says, this has huge ramifications. It's not just about getting a haircut. I heard a report this morning about how dairy farmers are having to dump gallons and gallons of milk. And people say, well, why don't they just go to the grocery stores? The grocery stores need it. Well, that's not how it works. You have different supply chains for restaurants and grocery stores. They take different technology for packaging and other things, and just to transfer it from one to the other overnight, it's not going to work. And the farmers were already struggling in a lot of cases because of trade wars and other things going on. So you have the people that literally feed us that are struggling right now a lot, and Don Lemon thinks it's just all about
look at oil. I mean, there's no place to store any more oil. Saudi Arabia is storing oil on ships at sea. They have dozens of ships just floating around out there, and that's one of the reasons why the price of gas has gone down is going down so much, is because there's less demand for it.
Yeah, and that can be good for consumers in some ways, except consumers aren't buying it because they're not going out. But
what I want to know, though, is that some states are under $1 and we're still at 172 or 173.
Yeah, what's up with that?
When do we catch up?
But
I just want to get a tank of gas for under $1 just for the novelty of it.
Take a picture.
Yeah.
So this will never happen again in my lifetime. Yeah. But there is a middle ground here. But every time people bring up a possible middle ground, they're being blasted for it. And I'm not hearing what the alternative is. We can't just hide under our beds until there's a vaccine. That's impossible. So we're going to talk more about this in a moment. I'll give you an example of someone who's trying to find some kind of middle ground, and he was trashed for it. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Just listen to this from the Pew Research Center. Overall, 43% of U.S. adults now say that they or someone in their household has lost a job or taken a cut in pay due to the outbreak. That's up from 33% in the latter half of March. Among lower-income adults, an even higher share, 52%, say they or someone in their household has experienced this type of job upheaval. This is unsustainable. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We're talking about coronavirus once again. And the thing I was discussing in the last segment, of course, is that there has to be some kind of middle ground here. You know, one person who was actually blasted by some on the right for what he said was Dr. Fauci, the infectious disease expert who's in the Trump administration, been the lead on a lot of this stuff. I want to play what he said over the weekend that got some criticism, but I think actually the criticism is kind of unfair in a lot of ways. But here's what he said.
The message is that clearly this is something that is hurting from the standpoint of economics, from the standpoint of things that have nothing to do with the virus. But unless we get the virus under control, the real recovery economically is not going to happen. So what you do, if you jump the gun and go into a situation where you have a big spike, you're going to set yourself back. So as painful as it is to go by the careful guidelines of gradually phasing into a reopening, it's going to backfire.
So he was kind of criticized by a lot of people on the right because they took it as he was going against the protesters. But when you listen to the whole cut, even he is admitting that we can start to gradually open up some of the economy. We just have to do it in the right way by some of the guidelines. And I think he's mostly correct that there is a way to do this. There is a middle ground here, but we can't bash all our leaders who are trying to find that middle ground. And unfortunately, when you go on social media and people I know on my social media saying anytime there's any kind of reopening, they're called stupid and they're just telling people to stay home. And usually the question I have for them in response is, well, how long? How long should they stay home? We were originally told 2 weeks. Now it's been over a month. Should it be till June? What are you going to do? Are you going to pay their bills? Are you going to feed them? I guarantee you they won't. And they'll say things like, well, the government should take care of them. Like it's just that easy, and that's how it works. And we see long lines at food banks now. And obviously this is not sustainable.
800 cars at a food bank in South Florida over the weekend.
Unbelievable. So when you see stuff like that, it's okay. That doesn't mean I want everyone to go out right now, and I don't want the virus to spread out of control, and I don't want a lot more people to die. I don't want anybody to die. But we have to look at the big picture and be reasonable, and I guess that's impossible now. One person that was trying to be reasonable was Jacksonville, the mayor of Jacksonville, Mayor Lenny Curry, And then there's the mayor of Jacksonville Beach, Charlie Latham. They both agreed to open the beaches in Jacksonville. And Jacksonville Beach was one of those beaches. Now, I want to play a cut here from Charlie Latham, who is the mayor of Jacksonville Beach. He was on Fox News, and he talked about how it mostly went okay. Here it is.
So far so good. It's been kind of mixed on social media. There's a lot of people that are upset that we've opened, but we're not requiring anybody to go to the beach. We're making the beach available as long as they meet very strict compliance requirements. And so far, our citizens have done that, and our visitors have done that. So right now, we believe it's a good decision. If things were to change, we could certainly shut it down in just a very short period of time if we needed to.
So it seems pretty reasonable, and I'm going to go over what they were allowed to do at the beach and not allowed to do in a moment. But they were blasted for this. Hashtag Florida Moron was trending on Twitter over the weekend. Why? Being outside is one of the best things you can do right now during this. And now we're telling people, no, go inside, but you can go to the grocery store and spread it there, of course. He continues on. Here's the next cut.
Well, everybody's different. Every community's different. And that's why we had to have local leaders. And as I've mentioned, all four of the mayors in Duval County worked together to put decisions together here to make this happen. We're still enforcing the requirement of social spacing. And, we're still keeping people from laying out on the beach. You're not allowed to have coolers. You're not allowed to have chairs. You're not allowed to have even towels to lay out on. If you want to run, jog, swim, surf, fish, you can do that, but you still need to maintain the social distancing requirement. And if they don't, we tend to educate first, then we warn second, and then we take action third. But we haven't had to do that. Believe it or not, we actually had to take the action when we were closed because people would come out on the beach when they weren't supposed to and be defiant about it. But since we've been open, it's been a good experience so far.
Okay, I believe that it was just those two cuts, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so that was the mayor of Jacksonville Beach talking about what they were doing. And it seems like a measured approach. And it just goes for all the beaches in Jacksonville. You can walk, as long as you're social distancing among other groups. You can swim, you can surf, but you can't just hang out in large groups. You can't just sit and sunbathe. And there were pictures over the weekend going around that were old. They weren't the right pictures. Yeah. We'll get to that. We have another cut in the next, and we have a lot more to get to. I want to continue this conversation on the beach in Jacksonville, and we're also going to get to a voice of reason of the day and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Well, welcome back to the show. I am Michael Yaffee, joined by Tom Benson in the control room today. Got an interesting text message, and you can text during the show if you'd like, at 23680. And this is kind of an example of the right unwilling to find a middle ground. So I played like Don Lemon. Mm-hmm. And many on the left are not wanting a middle ground. They just want to shut everything down. We can't have any new cases. The economy will just have to stay closed until the virus goes away, I guess. I don't know. I mean, people forget that flattening the curve did not mean lowering the number of cases. All it meant was spreading out the number over a long period of time so the healthcare system wouldn't be overburdened. That was the original intent.
Correct.
Because there's no way to totally stop it until there's a vaccine or an effective treatment. And that could take months, and you could kill the economy in the long run. And a lot of the media are not being honest with you about that and the original intentions on that. But on the other side of this, I got a text that came in and said this: middle ground? Did we settle for the middle ground when we demanded our liberty from England? Open the entire economy now. It should never have been closed in the first place. Now, a lot of the businesses that closed were not ordered by the government to do it. They did it on their own. So you can't blame the whole government. And I was against these full state shutdowns because it didn't make sense to me. You could have targeted shutdowns in certain hotspot areas, but full state shutdowns made no sense to me. But when you start saying we just need to open up everything now, it shouldn't have been closed in the first place, this is no big deal, it's unrealistic. And that really just gives fuel to the fire of those like Don Lemon and others who say you're selfish, you don't care about lives, you just want to open everything now. It's not realistic. And by the way, the whole did we settle for a middle ground when we demanded our liberty from England? Well, actually, we tried to find a middle ground with England for years. It was England who rejected it and decided to stamp down any opposition, and then we had to go to war with them to defend our liberty. So there was actually an attempt first at compromise before we went to war with England. And by the way, the Constitution, there was compromise in that as well, because we had the Articles of Confederation at the beginning of this country, but we needed a better compromise between federal control and state control, and that's how we got the Constitution. So to say we can never have middle ground ever because America, well, there's no real perspective on that. I'm so sorry. Now, you can believe we should have just kept everything open, but it's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. And I'm trying to be reasonable and give you some reasonable options, just like the mayor of Jacksonville, who basically came out and he defended his decision. He was blasted on social media. And there were pictures over the weekend of the beaches that were apparently overcrowded, but they were old pictures. And then when you actually watch drone video of the beaches, it wasn't that bad. And people are mostly social distancing, except the people they came with, but they already live with those people, so social distancing doesn't matter. And they're outside. They're not going to spread it to each other outside if they're 6 feet apart. So he said this, the mayor of Jacksonville, Curry, said, as I said in my announcement last week, the limited beaches reopening can be a first step and a pathway back to normal. But we must be mindful of the risks and respect the limitations, not only for our safety, but for the safety of our neighbors as well. He said, from the beginning of this crisis, the governor, myself, and others have suggested that people get out and exercise and move around and do it in a safe way. So with our curve flattening, this was a very measured opportunity to open more space out there when people were already moving around on First Street. And he basically said we can't just hide in our houses forever until there's a vaccine. It's totally impossible. So you have a measured approach, and people like him are still being blasted. So it makes you think, it makes you wonder, what are the real motivations behind those who are blasting him? Why did this become a political issue? Why did this become a political issue? I think it became a political issue because government is going to have to implement policy in order to combat the virus. So obviously it's going to be a political thing. What it really became, though, is partisan. Why is it that the left became the one for these shutdowns and really favoring just continuing these shutdowns, and the right wanting to start to open up the economy? Why did it split in that way? Well, I know what you're thinking, Tom Benson, and that's one of the reasons. I know exactly what he's thinking. We've worked too long together. I know where you're going. One of the reasons is because they want to hurt Donald Trump, because they want to hurt his reelection chances. They knew that Trump, his best chances at reelection were a strong economy. That's his best chance. So now that the strong economy is gone, they know it hurts Trump, and they want to make it, the longer this goes, they feel the worse it makes Trump look. So that's part of this. But I think a bigger part of this, honestly, is we are finding out how different both sides really view culture and the country. People on the right value a free market capitalist economy much more than people on the left. They just do. People on the left, a lot of them, they don't understand that a capitalist economy is what gave us our prosperity, but they just don't value that freedom in economics like people on the right do. It's just a fact. So this, when you're getting rid of a lot of our free market economy for this, people on the left is like, well, that was trash anyway. It's just big business and everything. They deserve to go down. Not understanding how all this works. So people on the left are, of course, they're not going to be as much in favor of opening things up because they really view the country and economics just in a very different way. This is so instrumental on how, such a great example on how big the divide is between the left and right, especially in economics, but also in culture. But the other reason is, frankly, they see this as an opportunity to change the country. Mm-hmm. They think that this is a great way to show that the country sucks and that it needs to be changed from the inside out. And here's an opportunity where we can start to do that. We can start to implement big government controls. People on the left tend to like big government more. People on the left tend to want to follow their government leaders and have the government more in control of things. And that's exactly what's happening during this pandemic. So, of course, they're not going to be in a rush to get out there more. Of course they're not going to be. And this is so instrumental of how fundamentally different we view the country and why it's important to educate people that, you know, the reason why we have it so great here is because of our economy and free market capitalism and all that stuff. Yeah, believe it or not, it's not government, big government control. Usually that kind of ruins things. So I really think that's why a big reason why it became partisan, more than just they hate Trump. And part of it is just, this is what we do. We go on our groups and it's the tribalism, you know. Once one person in our group says that we have to follow the crowd, which I hate anyway. But someone else who's being bashed for what they said was the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Deval Patrick. Now, he was bashed a few weeks ago when they accused him of saying we should let old people die to save the economy. Now, that's not what he was saying. He was saying some old people might be willing to risk their lives for the future of their country and their children and grandchildren. That's a little bit different than saying, oh, we just want all the old people to die because they don't matter. That's not what he said. And now he went back on Tucker, and he's not backing down, which I credit him for, because he got blasted for it, and he isn't backing down. And he said something else this week that the left is totally trashing him for. But what he said is right. When you really think about it, they don't want to admit that. They want to take him out of context. But here he is on Tucker Carlson. I believe it was last night when he said this, and he's getting blasted for it. Here it is.
I'm sorry that I'm vindicated. I wish it hadn't happened, Tucker, but I'm a small business guy, and I've been around the block long enough to see what was going to happen. When you start shutting down society and people start losing their paychecks and businesses can't open and governments aren't getting revenues and go on and on and on and on. So I'm sorry to say that I was right on this, and I'm thankful that we are now, Tucker, finally beginning to open up Texas and other states because it's been long overdue. You know, they told us, Tucker, to follow the science. Well, what science? I mean, at the end of January, Dr. Fauci, who I have great respect for, said this wasn't a big issue. 3 weeks later, we were going to lose 2 million people. Another few weeks later, it was 100,000 to 200,000. Now it's under 60,000. And we've had the wrong numbers, the wrong science. And I don't blame them. But let's face reality of where we are. In Texas, we have 29 million people. We've lost 495, and every life is valuable. But 500 people out of 29 million, and we're locked down, and we're crushing the average worker. We're crushing small business. We're crushing the markets. We're crushing this country. And what I said when I was with you that night, there are more important things than living, and that's saving this country for my children and my grandchildren, and saving this country for all of us. And I don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. But, man, we got to take some risk and get back in the game and get this country back up and running.
Now, what he said there, the part that he's getting blasted for, is he said, there are more important things than living. He's getting trashed for that. But he's right. Of course he's right.
And those who are trashing him don't know the definition of sacrifice.
Exactly. If there weren't people who believe that there are more important things worth risking than living, there would not be nurses going to hospitals right now to help those who have caught the virus. Nurses and doctors are working and really, really risking their lives to combat this virus on the front lines. And they know that they could die from that. But if you ask them, they would probably say something similar to what Deval Patrick said there. There are more important things than your own life. I'm willing to risk it for the greater good. Someone in the military would say the same thing. A police officer would say the same thing. Nobody wants to die. I'm not saying they're suicidal and they're just saying, oh, death is better than life. That's not what he's saying. But some things are worth the risk because you're helping others. And most men, especially, should believe that, I hope. But he's being blasted for this, of course, and taken out of context. Now, that's how this goes. Another person who's being blasted for this is President Trump, of course, because, once again, this is all partisan. But I want to play a voice of reason in the next segment. And really, this voice of reason should be a lesson to Trump. He won't be, but he should be, and I'll tell you why in the next segment. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeart Radio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Yes, welcome back to the show. This is another edition of Beyond Reason Radio. We've discussed a lot of different things on the show surrounding, once again, coronavirus, of course. If you missed any of it, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available after the show. Listen to the past shows as well and share them with your friends. Also, like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page and follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. So Nancy Pelosi has been criticizing Trump so much.
Really?
Yes, this is the reason why we're in this situation, Tom Benson, is it's all Trump's fault. He didn't take it seriously enough in the beginning. If it were her, if she was president, it would have been different, right?
Yeah.
Except here was Nancy Pelosi, February 24th, after Trump had blocked travel from China, February 24th in Chinatown, in her district, and here's what she's saying.
That's what we're trying to do today, is to say everything is fine here. Come, because the precautions have been taken. We think it's very safe to be in Chinatown and hope that others will come.
So she was in Chinatown saying, come out to the shops, come out. Yeah, no virus here. Everything's great. And, of course, you know why she did that, right? Because apparently people were being mean to the Chinese over this.
Of course.
There was no real evidence of that. Come on. Because Trump called it the Chinese virus later, and some people were saying, oh, it's coming from China. Maybe we should be critical of the government there. She's like, no, we have to go to China and just defend them because it's all identity politics. It's all the left cares about anymore is identity politics. But, I don't necessarily blame Pelosi completely for doing that other than being obsessed with identity politics. I just merely point that out because this is an unprecedented situation. And a lot of people didn't really know what to expect. They didn't know exactly what was coming. And to blame Trump completely for this, well, is beyond reason, especially when this is something that's affecting the rest of the world. And you're seeing worse situations in other parts of the world, like Europe, which, of course, have national health care systems, so they shouldn't have had the problem, but they did. But one person who did a great job defending Trump, my voice of reason of the day, Dan Crenshaw, was on Bill Maher and totally destroyed Bill Maher's narrative. And it was great. Representative out of Texas, Dan Crenshaw, here he is.
He on the 25th that we were going to have to lock down the country. He said the next day 15 people have it, and it's soon going to be close to zero. March 6th, he said anyone who wants a test can get it, which is still completely.
Let me stick to February.
Completely wrong.
As you go forward, because you mentioned February 25th. The day before, February 24th, that's when the administration requested $2.5 billion from Congress to fulfill, CDC, NIH, and FDA funding to combat the virus and the potential spread of it. What happened right then? I'll tell you because I was in Congress and I know what happened. Did we vote on a supplemental funding bill? No. Did we wait days to vote? No, still didn't vote on it. You know what we voted on later that week? Nancy Pelosi, the only thing she would put on the floor to vote on was a bill to ban flavored tobacco. That's what actually happened. It was only a week later that we actually voted on supplemental funding. that the administration requested. Your criticism appears to be based in one thing, that Trump was overly optimistic. That's his style. Again, you can criticize it. That's fine. But it's not connected to the actions that were actually taken. Because if I back up even further, February 14th, CDC announces ongoing work with 5 laboratories to perform community-based influenza surveillance and study the spread of the virus. We're in a fact-finding mode in February. People forget this. People keep calling February this lost month. But it's really not. That's an easy and cheap accusation because there's no big, bold moves taken like there was in January or like there was in March. But the reality is our government was working to create that test. Now, did they work as fast as we would have liked? And of course not. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I'm happy to go into. By March 3rd, there was only 102 cases in the United States. And yet I'm hearing criticism that we should have been locked down weeks earlier. But would you think the American people would have accepted that with only 100 cases in the United States? Italy didn't lock down until March 10th. Spain, not until March 14th. UK, not until later in March. Places like Sweden's never locked down. And so I provide all of that context as we try to basically accuse this man of he's being accused of having blood on his hands. And context is so important here.
So there's 2 reasons I wanted to play that. First, just because it was great cut. Everything he said made sense, and he was my voice of reason. But the second reason is I love how he combats the left in their narrative. And I wish Trump would learn from this, because he just goes after them with facts after facts after facts. He goes after them with reason and logic. Notice that there was no petty personal attacks against Maher in that cut. Notice there was no whining or complaining about stuff in that cut. It was really just, your narrative's wrong. Here's the facts. Try to debate me on this issue. Try to debate me on what I'm actually saying. And Bill Maher couldn't, because Dan Crenshaw actually knew what he was talking about. And that is definitely a great way to combat the other side. He definitely has a future in politics, I think, that Dan Crenshaw. So that was a good cut. I appreciate you listening to the show. If you miss any of the show, catch the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. Like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. Follow me on Twitter as well. Thanks to Tom Benson, of course, for coming in tonight. And I will see you guys at the same time tomorrow.